Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar titled Streamlining Health Technology Assessments by Automating Literature Reviews. I want to take this moment to thank the sponsor of today's event, Distiller SR, for making it all possible. I'm Sydney Menson from the events team at Scientist.com, and I'm happy to be your host for today's event. Joining us today, we're fortunate to have 5 experts participating in this session. I'll first introduce Dr. Chris Waters-Banker, Director of Consulting Operations at Maple Health Group. Chris has over a decade of experience in clinical scientific research with extensive knowledge in health research methodology across both basic and applied clinical sciences. Next up, we have Dr. Maria Erugui, Assistant Director of Evidence Synthesis and Modeling with Exenda. Maria supports literature reviews aimed at understanding the clinical and economic burden of disease and helps manufacturers prepare for regulatory and reimbursement submissions. Our third speaker is Dr. Rajshri Pandey, Associate Director at Kurta Inc. Rajshri serves as the evidence synthesis lead with extensive experience in evidence synthesis methods, including systematic literature reviews, indirect treatment comparisons, and public health research. The fourth speaker with us is Leanne Burke, an account executive with Distiller SR. Leanne is a librarian with a keen interest in bibliometric trends, literature review methodologies, and information management. The final participant with us today is also today's moderator, Dr. Patty Peoples, the president and founder of the Peoples Collaborative. Patty is a health economist, pharmacist, and industry leader with 35 years of experience in healthcare value, evidence, and access. And now I am pleased to bring Patty on with me. Hi, Patty. Take it away.
Hello, Sydney. Thank you so much. And welcome, everyone. I am really glad that you're here with us today. We're going to talk a little bit about something that I suspect every one of you that's online today deals with on a daily basis, and that is evidence assessment for better decision making. Now, I suspect that evaluating the literature in a targeted or a systematic way is probably on your docket on an almost a daily basis. And in fact, perhaps many of you now are being called to do ongoing or living literature reviews, either for internal usage or for HTA assessment. So today, what we're going to talk a little bit about is to visit with 3 panelists that have walked this journey before with increasing emphasis on conducting literature reviews in a more efficient, effective, high quality, and error-free way, and what tools that they are using that enable them to deliver this very important part of evidence assessment. I would like to encourage you today that this is not just a discussion between our 3 panelists. It's also a discussion with you. And so I want you to be sure to send in your questions at any time during our conversation today. We're going to address them interspersed throughout our dialogue. So be sure to use that Q&A panel and let us know what you're thinking about. I also want to give you a suggestion to head on over there to the handouts section. There are several documents in there that I think you're going to find really useful in your day-to-day work that gives some perspective on automation and use of tools for literature assessment. Before we kick off our panel, I want to invite Leanne Burke on. Leanne has a great deal of experience in utilizing the platform we're going to talk about today, but in more efficient ways to conduct systematic literature reviews and the use of automation. So she's going to do some level setting with us today, and then we'll kick into our panel. Leanne?
Thanks so much, Patty. Just to start us off today, we'll talk just a little bit at a high level about the topic and the tools. So health technology assessment, or HTA, is a process of evaluating the value of healthcare interventions, generally to inform the government or other organizations making decisions about market entry, pricing, or reimbursement. At the broadest level, it is intended to promote an equitable, efficient, and high-quality health system. An HTA can be conducted at any point in a health intervention's life cycle. It can be done before or after market introduction, or when a new indication for a marketed pharmaceutical is under consideration. As the focus on evidence-based decision-making in healthcare has increased, the role and scope of the HTA has evolved, and the demand for assessments has certainly grown. These factors create pressure to improve the efficiency of HTA processes, since major public and individual health, as well as economic consequences, flow from HTA findings. As one of the opening plenary speakers at last week's ISPOR Europe conference noted, it's not a revolution, it's more of an evolution. And as this area evolves, new tools like Distiller SR seek to improve the process in terms of efficiency and accuracy. More than 300 global organizations trust Distiller SR for their literature review use cases. And in this slide, you'll see that HTA falls into some of those use cases, but not all of them. And what this slide always highlights for me is the flexibility of Distiller SR. It's really a tool that can be configured based on your methodology and on your needs, and it's configurable by the end user. Overall, Distiller SR is a SaaS-based platform, and it's automating your literature review lifecycle from search all the way through to reporting. It's really meant to manage those administrative tasks, take them away from the human so that the humans, the reviewers, the subject matter experts can be really focused on what they need to do and their time is used efficiently. Starting from the search all the way through to reporting and everything in between, that screening, the full text retrieval, the data extraction, and the appraisal, all is managed in a workflow that can be automated with or without artificial intelligence. And speaking of evolution, our tool continues to evolve. Most recently, we have launched our Curator CR module, which is used for data reuse. And we did this in response to requests from many of our customers telling us that they don't want to duplicate work. So at a high level, if an article has been reviewed and the data has been extracted, if that same article comes up in a different project at a different time, and the questions are similar, Curator CR will show the end user that that data has already been extracted and they can import it easily. Essentially, they're not duplicating work anymore. And this is just one of many examples of how we really seek to make the process as efficient as possible, because as you're going to hear today, the volume of work is certainly increasing. Overall, our mission is the same as yours: better research. Back to you, Patty.
Thanks so much, Leanne. I appreciate you level setting with Distiller SR and Curator. An audience, if any of you would like to book a demo to learn more about this platform, please do so. There's going to be a panel that swings across your screen right now. It'll also be pinned to the top of your platform here if you'd like to book that demo at any time. So go ahead and just press that register now button, and it will go right to the folks at Distiller SR to set that up with you. So with that, I would like to invite all of our panelists to come online right now, and let's kick into our discussion. Hello, Rajshri, Maria, and Chris. It's lovely to have you join Leanne today. So let's kick it off, everybody, with talking a little bit about some of the trends that are going on. I think that it's no question that the volume of literature has exploded in the last couple of years. And not only is it more expansive in volume, but if you're engaged in evidence assessment in the pharmaceutical or medical device area, you're also grappling with increasing complexity of literature. So those are just a couple of the trends. And I'd like for you, thinking about your job in evidence assessment, what kind of industry trends have you been experiencing in the last couple of years and that you see going forward that are really making you rethink how you are doing evidence assessment? And Rajshri, I want to start with you, if you can speak a little bit about your experience from the perspective of CURTA.
Sure, thanks, Patty. I think the health technology assessments in itself are multifaceted. So they include clinical evidence, health economics evidence, patient perspective, and also now, the real world evidence. And the aim is to adopt high quality methods and incorporate the most recent evidence to inform the evidence-based decision making. And using the SLRs, we are able to synthesize this available evidence to inform our research questions. But then it comes with its own challenges. Conducting SLRs is a very resource and time intensive process. The topic areas where research is being produced is increasingly diversifying along with the evidence sources. So with this evolution in HTA, the volume of literature is just ever increasing. And some of the other challenges that we see is, the HTA timelines. So there's a time constraint, and then there's a need to constantly update the evidence portfolio with this new evidence. And then, also to retain this really high methodological quality. I think that's very imperative.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Rajshri. Maria, let me hear a little bit from you. Since you work in the value communication and modeling area, what kind of trends have you seen that have affected how you're managing your evidence?
Thank you, Patty. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I agree with Rajshri. We see the challenges that we are facing nowadays is that the increasing volume of evidence, it's unprecedented. I think we can agree on the unprecedented pace that it is growing. And there is an increase in the number of health technologies. For instance, if you went to clinicaltrials.com today, you could see that there are like over 18,000 active studies at the moment and many more in recruiting phase. And as he said, the timelines are constrained because there is like a general drive to make sure that there is faster patient access to effective health technologies. And the evidence that we need to include in payer submissions needs to be relatively recent. Usually it needs to be between 3 to 6 months old. So we need to really work in an efficient way to make sure that by the time we finish a systematic review, it is not already outdated. And this is conducting a systematic review is a great challenge in coordination. Precisely because of this, we need to staff projects with many team members to make sure that we meet timelines, and that comes with a challenge in itself. Like for instance, in Extenda, we staff projects with colleagues based in the US and also in Europe, and that's great. That gives us a lot of flexibility in the sense that there is always someone working in the project potentially, but it also requires a lot of coordination to make sure that we are all on the same page. We all know what we are doing and where the project is going.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. So you've talked a little bit about some of the operational challenges of conducting these literatures reviews across geographies, and Rajshri talked a little bit about the increasing complexity, different endpoints, that sort of thing. Chris, let's talk about it from your perspective. What process changes have you implemented at Maple Health to address some of these trends with increasing volume, complexity, and people requirements?
Yeah, thanks, Patty. I would say the biggest thing has been bringing in automation via a tool like Distiller. There's a lot of different features in Distiller that make dealing with these challenges a bit easier and much more manageable. I think to echo what Leanne had said in the opener, Distiller really allows for that flexibility so that you can apply the methodology that you need, because no project is the same. As much as we would love them to be that way, they are so diverse and so different, and there's always going to be these little nuances that are introduced, I feel like, in every single project I've ever done. And having a tool like Distiller allows me to systematically apply some of those differences in methodology and still feel very confident about the outcome of it, because we've done it in such a well-structured and manageable way.
Mm-hmm. So you're leaning on the automation. Rajshri, what were you doing before the use of a Distiller SR automated kind of approach to things? And what are some changes that you are seeing in your process and in the quality of your process after implementing such a platform?
Sure. I think everyone can agree that before automation or introduction of AI as a service capability, it was Excel. A lot of us were depending on Excel to see, how we are doing the process and screening the literature. But the problem is that there is more chances of error. You can miss out on studies, or quality check can be another challenge, which just made resolving conflicts a little bit problematic and time consuming. And the process in itself is like tedious and requires a lot of tracking. So at Curta, we use Distiller, SR also, and it helps us in speeding up the literature review process, especially providing us with a cleaner workflow, and in terms of discrepancy resolution, work assignments, timeline, and also allowing the multi-user concurrent use. I think that has been a boom, because screening is a step in which the SLR process is the most time consuming part, and you can apply automation or AI to resolve it and fasten or speed up the process. And another good thing about moving from manual to automation is it just makes the process very transparent and reproducible. And automation has helped us with assessments and reassessments of new treatments, and Distiller has definitely come really handy in both projects. So, for example, in a lot of projects like oncology as one therapeutic area, we see that the data is being presented constantly at very speed up pace, and at congresses, conferences, and using an AI-enabled platform to speed up the process has definitely been helpful. And the other ways is just to move away from that manual process and using an online platform for screening literature. So using inclusion exclusion logics with Distiller per se is just time saving, reduces errors, and our team works across time zones. And with pandemic, we have gone more remote, and people have started collaborating more online. It's just easier and easy to track, also do a version control. And it still enables us and our team members to work on the projects, not just at the same time, but multiple users working on projects at the same time.
Thank you, Rajshri. That's really clear about some of those benefits. While we're, I'm going to ask Maria to tell us a little bit about how a platform like this addresses some of the transparency challenges that we have in literature review, as well as how you use it for conflict resolution.
Yeah, thank you. So, one thing about Distiller that I love is that you can monitor the screening process in real time, and that means that you can see how far you are in your screening, but also you can also monitor if there are any conflicts between between screeners when you have to conduct a dual screening review. And this so one thing we do that I really like about this tool is that it allows you to pair junior and senior reviewers to review the same set of references. And this is very interesting because for quality assurance purposes, because it ensures that the expertise of the more senior reviewer is utilized across a wider range of references, as many as possible. And it also allows the more junior reviewer an opportunity for training. So if we set both reviewers at the same time screening, and we can monitor in real time if conflicts are arising, like if they have different screening decisions for the same references, we can take a step back and see if perhaps we need to refine a little bit the screening guidance, or make sure that everybody in the team understands what is the PICUS criteria. And this in the long run saves us a lot of time if we do this early enough in the process, because it gives the more junior reviewers confidence that they understand the kind of studies we need to include in the review, and at the end it just speeds the screening process. And yeah, we miss this way that we don't miss any relevant references by pairing screeners like that.
Thank you, Maria. I hadn't thought about it from the perspective of training and how it can be used for bringing those junior reviewers into a training situation that you feel like you've got the quality approach to it. Chris, tell us at your organization at Maple Health, what were you doing? You mentioned you were using Excel, but what are some of the greatest benefits that you have seen in running your department with the implementation of an automated platform?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Patty. So I would say one of the really big benefits of using Distiller that I use so often that I actually forget that it's a key feature, and one of the big reasons why we started using Distiller is the broadness of scope that we have. We've all talked about it. We're all experiencing it. And knowing that up front, being able to structure our screening forms to accommodate for that has been a real big benefit. So if we know that there may be some criteria that adjusts over time, because perhaps our client wants to see the volume of a certain type of population before they decide whether or not to include or exclude it. Before, when you're in Excel, it's really clunky and it's error prone to keep track of those types of things, and then to go back and potentially adjust that criteria as you're going along. With Distiller, you can set up your forms and ask very specific questions regarding that type of criteria broadness. And then once it's a little bit more firm, you can actually retroactively apply those decisions without having to rescreen anything. Or having to go back and identify where that may be and change your answers. That can all be retroactively done. And when you're talking about a large volume literature review, that is a huge time saver. And so I really like that aspect of it. Similarly, probably using things like labels and filters also help with that process, to where you can kind of bucket your evidence as you need to, and you can control the workflow of that evidence as you're moving through the screening process. For example, I had a client email me just 2 days ago and say, hey, by the way, we might want you to identify economic evidence earlier. We have some cost-effective analysis activities that we need inputs for. And this is a 10,000 citation SLR. We just started screening last week. So we're like, okay. So now with it, that was a very immediate change that we needed to make, but Distiller made that so much easier, because now we're just simply applying an economic label to every paper that we screen that has an economic component to it, so that now once we get to that full text phase, we can actually use that label and filter it to its own form and prioritize the screening of those before we screen the rest of the volume, so that we can get them their inputs that they need way sooner than we would have if we would have waited until January, when that particular deliverable was due. So it allows us to partition that and be able to focus on different types of evidence at the same time. And then I think the reprioritization tool is key. That's an AI-based feature that uses natural language processing. The inputs from the screeners go to building an algorithm that then show you the papers that have the most likely probability of being included based on the decisions that have already been made. And so you move a lot of those really relevant citations to be screened up front. So you can find that almost 95% of your relevant papers within 30 to 40% of your total volume. And when you're talking about a 10,000 citation type literature review, that's saving you potentially days and weeks to be able to move on to your full text screening phase a little bit sooner than you would if you had had to screen that entire volume before moving to that next phase.
Mm-hmm. So with reprioritization, Chris, does that also enable you to use your subject matter experts early on more efficiently? Can you talk a little bit more about how you can allocate staff to their highest, best use of time, if you will, with this process?
100%. It's always a good idea with a tool like this to put your best screeners in first, that really understand the content and really understand what are the papers that it is that we're looking for, so that we can really prime that algorithm to show those most relevant papers first. And as that screening volume is realized and you've hit about 90% of the most probable includes, you can now take that expert screening group and move them onto full text screening, while potentially your more junior group goes through what should be largely excludes. The majority of our volumes that we get are excludes. So being able to go through and just ensure that there isn't, a few here and there that may actually be includes. And I think it really helps move along those phases a little bit quicker.
Audience, of those of you that have not utilized automation, drop a chat to me and let me know why you haven't used it yet. Is it because you're not familiar with platforms? Maybe you don't have the volume that's demanding it. Let us better understand what's going on in your world. Leanne, let me go to you because you work a lot with new customers on Distiller SR. What are the main reasons that people start evaluating a platform like this? What major problem are they trying to solve?
I would say the number one problem is time and or efficiency, because those two things are really related. They recognize that the process they have is costing a lot of human hours, and that a lot of that time is spent on administrative tasks that, they know from other things that they use in their world, apps on their phone or different things, that, automation can help them with these kinds of administrative tasks. And so that's typically their first and most important need is time savings and efficiency.
Rajshri, I know that your organization, as do the others on screen, have occasionally run into client express concerns about automation, that it takes the human element out of the process, and there's a degree of discomfort with that. Tell me a little bit about how your organization has ensured that there are human touch points in the automation process.
Sure, thanks, Patty. I think human touch points are definitely important. I mean, we're all humans. We need the machine or the AI to work. There are humans behind it. So I think it starts with the protocol phase. If we have a stronger protocol, if we have our strategy set a priori, I think it also enables automation to be more effective and reproducible. So human touch points are definitely important. And I think having the initial stages and, touching base with junior reviewers to see, if they have questions, it is very important, and it is the key. And I think that's where I would say, like, human touch point is important during the entire process. We are definitely automating the process of screening, and also, thinking about the bibliography and talking about the search alerts. But we need touch points. That is important. We do hear, there is a lot of lack of consensus in the use of automation. But I think that we need a lot of, discussion and I would say, just that awareness, to bring that awareness that it is good. Artificial intelligence, it learns over time. And as Chris had mentioned, that, if you have the best screeners in the beginning, you will have that good outcome, and you can have that reproducibility moving forward in the process. Whether you're doing a new systematic review, whether you're doing a reassessment, it really helps.
Thank you. Leanne, let's go to you with this. We've got a question from Dominic. And Dominic says, Distiller seems important for CROs and other solution providers in delivering SLRs, but is it relevant for pharma companies who sponsor that work? Does Distiller support pharma sponsors in any way better than a CRO might approach that work? So how are pharma companies essentially using it in your experience?
Yeah, we have the top 6 out of 10 pharma companies using Distiller SR, but like Chris said, no two projects are the same. Even though we have a lot of templates and workflows in Distiller, I think everyone uses them differently. So in the pharma space, we have people in health economics research for sure. We have people in medical affairs who are sometimes doing more surveillance type work as they're trying to make decisions. We have people in R&D who are also might be just looking at possible products that they want to investigate in the future, and that could be like a one project, or it could be surveillance. And finally, we have adoption of distiller SR in the pharmacovigilance space also.
Mm-hmm.
So really a lot of different use cases across the board for pharma.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Maria, where would you, if someone was wanting to get started on something like this, where would you recommend they start? What type of parameters might define a project that would be a good test case?
You mean like how to, like if you ever need to use the tool for the first time?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, well, I guess if you ever need to use the tool for the first time, I would recommend that first of all you have a good look at the manual, because it's written in a nice way, and it has several videos, and it can help you have a little bit of an introduction to the tool. And once you are confident and familiar with the tool, I guess you want me to explain the steps of how to set a distiller project, perhaps, or?
No, what I'm looking for is what sort of operational predictors might say this would be a good SLR to implement automation on. Is it volume of literature? Is it complexity of literature? Is it turnaround time? What kinds of things would say this is a good project for this?
I think it's always a great idea. It really simplifies your working life a lot to have an automation tool. But of course, if you have to work in a huge project with people in different time zones, it is very good to have a multi-user web tool to work on that. And if you have a very large, if you're working in a therapeutic area that is it has a lot of evidence to process, then automation is definitely key.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess the larger the project, the more it makes sense. But in my opinion, it always makes sense. I've been working with Distiller for about 7 years now, and prior to that, I used to work in academia with Excel files, and I just could not go back to spreadsheets.
At the top of the hour, Roger, we talked a little bit about the increasing heterogeneity of the literature, from clinical, economic, patient-reported outcomes, literature in all forms. Tell me a little bit about how Distiller SR has helped you manage literature heterogeneity.
Thanks, Patty. And I think this with the volume of literature and the diversity that we're seeing, I think that's a big challenge that comes. But I think with Distiller, we've been able to label studies, tag studies, and from the supplementary searches, conferences, and databases during the screening. So for example, if you're looking at a specific study design, or, for example, studies published at conferences like ISPO or ASCO, ESMO, you are able to create a separate label filter for those. When you're at a form stage, you can create logics, you can label studies within the screening questions to go to a different bucket. So for example, if I'm not interested in looking at a particular outcome, but it is interesting, we might look at it later, you can always create logics within the form to move it to a separate bucket and collect information on outcomes, so included in the studies while screening. And then I think the other feature that I really like and use is highlighting keyword features. That helps to draw reviewers' attention to useful information during the screening process, so that you can highlight them with different colors. You have study designs, you can highlight them, and that just helps in so that someone doesn't miss out on important information, and it's then difficult to go back to all the information. I mean, rescreening is definitely a pain, but with Distiller, we have kept that aside, and we are able to use these filters, labels, tags, and keyword highlights.
Interesting. Leanne, this is a question for you, and it's from our audience member, Sabrina. How much data needs to be uploaded for the AI function to work effectively?
I love this question actually, because it really, I think, highlights the fact that the AI is going to augment the human effort, that the humans are going to train that AI in the first place, that it's not just an algorithm that's arbitrarily going to make decisions. So that's the first part of the answer to that question. There's more than one kind of artificial intelligence feature in DistillerSR. So Chris talked about the AI reprioritization. We also have AI classifiers, and that's where a yes or no question, a closed-ended question, can be answered. So is this a systematic review? Yes or no. Is this an RCT? Yes or no. It doesn't need to be simple. It just needs to be a yes or no closed-ended question that is answerable. So if you were to ask a broader question like, what is the quality of life of someone after an intervention? Quality of life is not a yes or no. You could, however, list out different things that might be deemed markers for quality of life and train the classifier on that. But the question that was asked was really how much data is required, and the answer is it depends. And it really needs to be an equal or an almost equal amount of yeses and nos for the AI to learn. So in some cases, if the question is easier, it will take a smaller data set. You know, it could be 50 or even 100 that have been screened, and it could learn that quickly. Again, the equal number of yeses and nos. If it's something a little bit more complex, or that it needs to learn to infer through natural language processing and other processes, then it might take a little bit more than that. But in any case, there are metrics within DistillerSR where you can run a report to understand how well it's performing.
Thank you very much. That was really helpful to me. Sabrina, you're out there and you've submitted that question about how much data, and you also have a question here that I'd like a little clarity on. So if you could just pop the clarity into the Q&A. You ask, how is confidentiality preserved? If you could give me a little bit more background of what you're wondering about on the confidentiality, I'll make sure to ask that question. But now let's go to Antonia. And Antonia wants to know, how often do you provide updates of your tool, and what are the most often mentioned concerns of DistillerSR? Really, where are you guys focusing on platform improvement? So updates, Leanne, and then platform expansion and improvement.
So this year we will have done 6 updates by the end of the year. And this is up than in past years. We've actually changed our process for updates significantly. And I'll not get into the technology behind that, but we're looking now more at regular sprints as opposed to big releases. And we know that this makes a big difference for customers who want something changed or fixed. If we're only doing 3 or 6 releases a year, it's hard for us to be really proactive. At the same time, we want our developers to be able to do things and make changes and get that feedback in real time so we can continue to move forward quickly. So that's updates. And the second part, can you remind me?
The second part is what are the areas that you're focusing on for product expansion?
So I guess what we're focused on mostly in Q1 is really the working with PDFs and full text. So right now, DistillerSR's AI, for example, works on the title and abstract that comes in with the bibliographic record. And there is some capacity to upload full text PDFs, but we know, and you know, that PDFs are really heterogeneous. So we're working hard on a lot of the technology to be able to import them more easily, and then ultimately as a next step to make them more readable and make that data extraction easier using machine learning. So those are our key Q1 things on our path. But I will say we have a lot of customers that we meet with regularly who are really generous with their time and willing to tell us if something needs to be changed or fixed. So while we have a roadmap, we also have this other whole stream of feedback where we try to really address things. And it doesn't need to be 10 customers that tell us. I think everyone at Distiller would agree that if one customer has told us, there's probably a few more that would also like it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Let's go now to Rajri. And Chris, I'd like for you to weigh in as well. It's no secret that I think our HTA agencies are, we don't have any guidelines about how automation can be used. Rajshri, can you set the stage of what the status is now with HTA bodies allowing automation? And then I'll go to Chris and talk a little bit about where we think we should go to try to better define this. So Rajshri, set the stage for us.
Sure. I think I don't think we have like a set HTA guideline for that, but we have seen in Prisma and Cochrane that they have been used. But I would love Chris to weigh in on that too, if she has seen anything and she's seen so far.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, like I have not seen any guidance come out for HTA and how they would prefer or allow the use of AI for literature reviews. The idea is that we think that they are using some sort of automated platforms as well, because we have to think about it. A lot of times they're under the same constricted timelines as we are, and they're looking at a similar volume of evidence to do their own reviews. So we think that they're using it, but we just want to know how and what they find to be acceptable. And maybe as more and more agencies begin to use this technology, we'll start to see that come out. That's the hope. But right now, we do have the Prisma guidelines that specify that AI is an acceptable reason for exclusion, particularly at the title abstract phase. That was in the newest update in 2020. And then we have the Cochrane Handbook has also integrated the use of AI technology in literature review. And so we know that it is an acceptable thing that we can use for literature review. But I think the end game of where it's going and who's going to review it and how it's going to be accepted is kind of the thing that we're waiting to understand. Mm-hmm. There are some issues, obviously, when it comes to transparency. So how should we be reporting this? How do we go about talking about these algorithms? Some of that is proprietary information. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of leaves in this weird gray area of methodology, especially when one of the hallmarks of something like an SLR is the reproducibility and the robustness of it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where we're looking in the future to see a little bit more guidance from these agencies on how they would like us to report it and use it and what's the appropriate way of doing so.
Thank you. Thank you. It really is an area that needs some directed focus, I think, from the lit review community, don't you? Maria, I'd like to ask you, since you've been a Distiller SR user for, I think you said 8 years or more, Sabrina has a question, does the Prisma generate automatically? And is there automation for the extraction validation phase?
Yes, there is a feature in Distiller, and I think there is even an update. We used to have the Prisma 2009 diagram until recent, and now Distiller offers the option to generate automatically a Prisma 2020 diagram, and you can export it into Excel and edit whatever you need, or you can also export it as a figure to directly copy into your report if you need to. And the second question, sorry?
It was, is there any automation for the extraction validation phase?
Okay, so for the extraction, so we create, so when we set up project, we create this is what we call screening forms, and these are just a set of questions that you present the reviewer every time the reviewer needs to screen a reference. And in these forms, you can add whatever. There are many ways to customize it to make it specific to your project, and you can make it as simple as, is this reference relevant, yes or no? Or you can include some radio buttons or combo boxes, or even like boxes to collect text to extract relevant details of the studies. So I guess this is the way we have to automate to make it automatic, to have forms that are the same for everyone. And then when you prepare a report with the data that you have collected during the screening, you can export all this information into an Excel file and then work with it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Leanne, is there a simple way to export lists of excluded records by reason of exclusion?
Yeah, actually, but I think Chris might be equally able or even more happy to answer this question.
Okay, hit it, Chris.
Yeah, so Sabrina, I do see your question. These are great questions. Just to add on to Maria's answer, you can set up those data extraction forms, as she said, but Distiller also offers some more standardized forms for things like quality appraisal. So you can pull up specific quality appraisal type forms in Distiller if you would like, or you can make your own depending on the needs of your project. So there are ways to do that. It will require a human to go in and fill out that information, but then the forms keep everything really nice and tidy, which is really good, especially when you're working in an SLR and you have duplicate reviewers. It really helps cut down the conflicts. So it saves you a lot of time there. Exporting reasons for exclusion is one of my favorite features of Distiller. Something that used to take literally hours to do, it can be done in a matter of minutes because you can isolate your excludes. If you set up your screening form by your PICOS criteria to where at each point where there is an exclude, it would fall under like a population question, an intervention question, outcome, etc. Then as you're going through, you export that to Excel, you sort, you're done. So it's absolutely fantastic for that. So good question.
And then let's go to Maria. Give me your favorite feature of Distiller SR and why.
You've already mentioned most of my favorite features. Maybe one that we didn't discuss yet is that you can deduplicate references in Distiller. So usually when you conduct a systematic review, you retrieve data from several databases, and often you will have some overlap in references across databases. And Distiller offers you a tool to deduplicate these references to make sure that you don't duplicate efforts during the screening process. So usually I run this deduplication at the beginning of my project when I upload all my references. And then later, if perhaps there is an update to that systematic review and I need to upload an additional set of references, I run it again to make sure like I don't go again through the same references. And I think that's a quite time saver.
Nice.
Tool.
Thank you. Rajshri, what's your favorite?
I think all of the above. Plus, I think I really like the reporting process. So we talked about the inclusion exclusion decisions, and then you can smoothly get the Prisma flowchart, and you don't have to create it manually. I think that has been great. But in addition to all of that, doing a version control, quality control allows for a very robust and transparent review process. Plus managing users or projects by assigning them on different levels and different tasks. It just saves time. So these are some of my additional features that I really like.
Thank you. Increasingly, I am reading more and more about living SLRs, ongoing repetitive approaches to literature review. Maria, can you help our audience level set on what a living HTA or a living SLR is, and help us understand how that need could be addressed with a platform like this?
Sure. A living systematic review is a method to update systematic reviews. With this method, the systematic review is continually updated. And the aim of living systematic reviews is to add relevant new evidence to your review as soon as it becomes available. And I guess they were born as an attempt to narrow the gap between the research findings and the healthcare practice to reduce the inaccuracy caused by some out-of-date systematic reviews. And the core methods for living systematic reviews are the same as systematic reviews, but it does incorporate some additional elements, like to name a couple, like you need to pre-specify how often the systematic review is going to be updated. And perhaps the publication format of a living systematic review is also different. Instead of the conventional static report or manuscript that we see in conventional systematic reviews, in living systematic reviews, they tend to be online evidence summaries, which are frequently updated. As frequently as they are, as the systematic review is updated.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So, audience, are you dealing more and more with living systematic reviews? Drop us a chat if you are. Susie wants to know, and I'm going to go with Chris on this. Susie states that one of the main barriers to adoption is the absence of a sufficient evidence base on the effectiveness of AI techniques. This is a barrier to HTA agencies that are providing the guidelines. Does the panel have a view of how this evidence base through empirical methodologic research might be generated? Any thoughts there, Chris?
Yes, I think this is a really great question. And I think that this is maybe why we're not quite seeing any guidance from HTA yet. And I think, as we discussed earlier, some of the barriers are that some of the AI tools are proprietary. And so it's hard to be as transparent as possible on those. But I think the way that I address this, and I think this is also kind of harkens back to what we talked about with our clients' hesitation to use these tools for systematic literature review, is I think being very clear, open, and honest that this is augmenting the human experience, such as Leanne mentioned. Humans have to train it, humans have to run the program. We're just using tools to help. As much as you could say, we don't necessarily trust computers to make decisions, I've personally seen situations where the computer has made much better decisions than the human screeners, because we are human, we get tired, we need to sleep, we need to rest. Sometimes we need to walk away from our computer and take a break because we're just so bored of reading. And so the computer never gets that way. And it makes all of its decisions in a very unbiased way, but it's been trained to do it. And so different tools, I think, within Distiller really highlight this well, with things like the error checking, to be able to say, you know what, we rank this as a high priority based on all the decisions that the human screeners made, but it got excluded. And you take a second look at that, you say, actually, yeah, that should be included. And so then you get to a point where you're seeing that this technology is actually making these SLRs much more robust. And you can apply some of these quite easily to even, targeted literature reviews as opposed to systematic, and make those literature reviews even more robust. And that becomes very attractive to our clients who don't necessarily have the budget or time for an SLR, but need to have that more systematic approach to it. Mm-hmm. And so I really think that being very clear about how we're using AI and choosing when and where we can use it is a really great feature of Distiller, because it offers that flexibility. If your client's really uncomfortable with doing AI classifiers and things like that and making screening decisions, then you don't have to apply that. You can still follow that same methodology, and Distiller really helps you, I think, meet the standards that are out there currently for things like systematic review via the Cochrane and CDR guidelines. So I think it's really the future of where we're going, and especially primed for things like living reviews. So I'm really hopeful for the future that we're going to get some of this guidance soon.
Mm-hmm. I am too. Let's close out with a final question with Leanne. Leanne, Nomabongo wants to know, is Distiller SR for HTA, pharmaceutical, medical device, health technology arenas only, or can it be used by people in other disciplines or different research fields other than health?
It can absolutely be used in other research fields. Today we're talking about HTAs, but we certainly have a lot of other webinars and case studies on our website that you could see. I will say to you that while health is mainly our user base, we do have some that are outside of health, because they're doing really the same thing. A literature review is a literature review. And because Distiller is so configurable and you put your own questions into it and you're extracting the data you want, the topic doesn't actually matter. It's really quite agnostic as a platform.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Well, audience, we are coming to the end of our hour, and I want to thank all of our panelists. All three of you were so helpful. Four of you were so helpful in today's presentation, and I want to thank you for sharing your individual experiences, and Leanne, for you giving that overview of the product and of HTA, and then each of you panelists for telling us what's going on within your organization and how you're using automation to approach SLRs. I would also like to thank Evidence Partners for sponsoring this webinar, and I will turn it over to Sydney to close us out.
Thank you all so much for participating. That was a wonderful experience today. In closing, we hope you enjoyed this webinar sponsored by Distiller SR, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.